We were on our way home after watching the new Hunger Games movie. My sister Olivia was falling asleep next to me. We were all silent, listening to the radio when my dad suddenly came to a full stop. It took me a second to realize what he had seen. A small truck was blocking most of the road in front of us. "What's going on there?" Olivia asked in a sleepy voice. That's when a young woman stumbled out of the truck and walked around it to the side that wasn't in vision. Her legs seemed to be hurt. She was grabbing the side of the truck to stay in balance. My parents immediately got into helper mode, seeing a person who didn't look much older than their children. I guess she was around 20 or so. "Stephen, call 911. I'll go check if she's all right," my father said. "Maybe we should stay in the car and wait for help, honey. I've seen people tricking people into getting out of their car and..." "We can't just sit here and wait, Mary. There might be someone even more hurt on the other side." Before my mother could say anything else, he was already stepping out of the car. My mother opened her door to follow. "Kids, lock the car and stay inside." We were stopped on a quiet road. Around us were only trees. They slowly walked towards the other side of the truck. My father called out to the stranger. After that, we didn't hear anything else. I grabbed my phone and called an ambulance. "Should we check on them?" Olivia asked after a while. "I don't know. Mom said..." Before I could finish my sentence, my mother appeared from the back of the truck. Her face had lost all its color. She was walking fast and determined. When she reached the car, Olivia unlocked the doors. She sat down behind the wheel without a word. Her expression was eerily calm. "Mom?" I whispered. "What's going on? Is someone hurt?" My mother didn't respond. And suddenly she opened her mouth as wide as humanly possible and screamed from the top of her lungs. I unbuckled my seatbelt, leaned over, and grabbed her by the shoulder. "Mom? Mom, what happened?" Olivia shouted and grabbed her door handle, but before she could open it, my mother had locked all the doors. She stopped screaming and took a few breaths before she hit the gas and started driving in reverse. After we were so far away that we couldn't really see the truck anymore, she turned around and took a different road to our home. She didn't respond to us. She didn't answer any questions. We kept asking about Dad, but she said nothing. Next to me, Olivia started crying, and then she took out her phone to call the police again. When we reached our driveway, my mother finally unlocked the car. Still silent, she walked straight home. Olivia and I exchanged a look of fear and shock. Then she jumped to the front of the car. "I'm going back. You go inside." "No, I'm coming with you." Even from inside the car, we heard the shrill sound of my mother's scream coming from our house. We ignored it and kept driving until we found the road with the trees. I kept trying to call my dad the entire time, but it went straight to voicemail. There was a police car waiting, but no sign of a truck. One officer was waiting by the police car. Another one was looking around the side of the road. We jumped out of the car and asked where our father was. The officer told us that they arrived a few minutes ago and that there was no sign of anyone. At first, they asked us if we played a prank on them, but when he saw our concerned faces and listened to our story, he said that they would follow us home and talk to our mother. "Don't worry, we will do anything we can to find your father," he said, before we went back into the car. My entire body was trembling. I had never in my life experienced anything this frightening, and I couldn't stop thinking about my dad. I hated that he didn't listen to my mom's concerns. When we reached our house, the lights in the kitchen were on. The officers followed us inside. My mother wasn't screaming anymore, but we heard the kettle in the kitchen. We followed the sound, expecting to find my mother there. I almost cried in relief when I saw that it was actually my dad. His hair was greasy and he had changed into his pajamas. "Kids, I've been worried sick about you," he said loudly, and then his gaze shifted to the two police officers. "Sir, are you all right?" "Dad, we've been trying to call you. What the hell happened?" Olivia shouted and tried to run to him, but one of the officers held her back. "I'm absolutely fine. Fantastic even. Except for the fact that I had to take a taxi home. The prices of that..." "Sir, we need to ask you what happened to the truck and the woman inside." My dad shook his head. "She was fine. Her car just wouldn't start, so I helped her and then she drove off. All good. Was there anyone else with her? My dad shook his head. May we talk to your wife? She already went to bed, but I suppose we can wake her up. One of the officers walked upstairs with my father, while Olivia and I stayed in the kitchen with the other one and explained the situation one more time. When the other officer returned, he explained to us that my mother told the same story about the broken down car. Apparently, my mother remembered that the stove was still on, so she quickly drove home with us. You could hear the skepticism in his voice, but there wasn't much else they could do. They gave us their number and told us to call when anything else came up or parents said anything. After they left, I went to touch the stove. It was ice cold. A little after that, my mother started screaming again. I used to have one of those big cars they don't make anymore with huge seats. At night, it would always make me nervous getting into the car because the back seat was so big and dark that there could easily have been someone hiding in there on the floor, and I wouldn't have seen them when getting in. I could have turned on the interior light and checked every time I got in, except the light was burned out and I was too lazy and cheap to replace it. To make matters worse, the guy I bought the car from said it was haunted. Some family had died in there from carbon monoxide in their garage or something like that. So one day, I had to take my 5-year-old son to the dentist. He liked to sit in the back where he could lie down on the seat. He was also a little prankster, and he hated to go to the dentist above all. It was a long drive and we had an early appointment. It was still dark when I rounded him up, and we headed out to get in the car. I put him in the back and closed the door. I had to jiggle the battery cable to get it started, but I eventually got the car on the road. I have trouble driving at night, so I have to pay attention every second. It's called night blindness, but I only have it a little bit. I can still drive at night, but what I have trouble doing is taking my eye off the road even for a second. We were on a dark and deserted stretch of road which cut through the forest when I felt my son Davy in the back seat, running his finger up and down the back of my neck. I shouted for him to stop. He stopped for a minute and then started it again. Up and down the back of my neck. Up and down. It was really annoying and distracting. No matter how much I told him to stop, he kept doing it. What's worse is about halfway there, he started making strange noises from the back seat. First, he started breathing heavy, and then he started growling like an angry dog. I was so mad by the time we got to the dentist's office, I got out of the car as soon as I put it in park and swung the back seat door open, ready to give him an earful. But Davy wasn't there. The back seat was empty. Now there's no way he could have gotten out in the time between my stopping the car and opening the back door. I instinctively called back to my house where Davy picked up the phone. My blood ran cold, and I wouldn't get back in that car ever again. I called for an Uber instead. Turned out my son had crawled out through an open window when I had the hood up wiggling the battery cable. He was trying to avoid going to the dentist.